This is the Try Swim Coach podcast, where the most difficult leg of the triathlon becomes your friend, leaving your struggles and your competition behind you. TrySwimCoach.com, helping you to laugh at the water.
Welcome back to another episode of the Try Swim Coach podcast. This is Kevin, and this is number 122. And in just a minute, I have an interview coming up with Coach Rory Buck from Dubai. And we're going to get into the top 3 challenges of swimming for the non-swimming triathlete. So stay tuned for that. It's a really great chat. Rory is filled with a lot of great information, and we're pretty much in line with a lot of the kind of coaching technique and workout philosophies. So just a couple things before I get to the interview. Open water season is upon us. It's actually starting to warm up a little bit, at least where I am. And it's time to jump in that big body of water, whatever that is near you. So let me know if you have any challenges with open water. That's always a good topic to discuss because there's so much to open water swimming. And it's kind of like when you get in the open water, it's kind of like a metaphor for life. All the things that you have to deal with and kind of struggle with, and then the rewards you get when you turn that buoy and you finish that swim. So I'd love to hear from you. We have a Facebook page, and we also have a membership site that I've mentioned a few times on the podcast, but you can find out more at TrySwimCoach.com. And if you want to follow our blog, we have a blog that's updated regularly 2 or 3 times a week at TrySwimCoach.com/blog. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your comments. Any kind of interaction would be awesome. So without further ado, here is my interview with Rory Buck. Have a great week of training, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Well, I'm really excited to have Rory Buck on the show today. Rory is a coach that has spent over 14 years identifying the most effective ways of moving through the water. And he's helped triathletes finish their first race and has also coached Ironmen who have competed at the World Champs. So Rory, welcome to Try Swim Coach.
Hey, thanks very much, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're coming from Dubai, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm based in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. I've been here for about 5 years now, coaching and working with triathletes.
Yeah, and but you're actually originally from South Africa?
That is correct. Although I grew up in the middle of Africa, in Malawi, a small country in the middle of Africa called Malawi, and then coached on the west coast of Africa in Namibia, in Windhoek, and then I went to school, university in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you've been all over the place. Now, I'm curious about Malawi. So did you end up, were you swimming there? Like, did you grow up swimming or?
Yeah, that is, I started swimming at the age of 16. Well, I knew how to swim, but I started training at the age of 16 in Malawi, almost out of boredom, with not a lot of other stuff to do. And that's kind of where it took hold. Yeah, I went on from there to swam for South Africa and then swam in CAAs in the US. And yeah, that's kind of the journey that I took. Got into triathlon coaching when a parent of a swimmer that I had been coaching in Spokane approached me for some help, and started working with his tri club, and then recognized that I actually enjoyed working with adults and triathletes a lot more than children, and sort of transitioned into that. And it's been a very rewarding process.
Yeah, I did the same thing with, I kind of worked with adults and children, and I sort of gravitated towards adults. And part of that was because there weren't many people doing that. Everybody was focused on kids, teaching kids lessons, while there are so many adults that need help. And
right.
Yeah, what do you think about the difference? Like I have some ideas of differences between how kids learn and how adults learn.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think about this a lot. I think the biggest fundamental difference, not necessarily about the learning process, but how adults approach learning, especially with the demographic that I coach on a daily basis. If I look at what these people do on a daily basis, most of them are quite accomplished in their professional careers. They're at a level in their life where they've picked up triathlon, particularly as a challenge, the next adventure. And when they get to the pool, they all of a sudden have to learn this new skill of swimming that they didn't learn when they were children. And they've sort of forgotten that process of learning. And it's really fun to kind of, and sometimes frustrating, but to take them back to having to be a beginner, a very beginner again at something, and be humbled by something like the water and go through the processes of the stages of learning where they don't even know what they don't know, and then start to become consciously aware of how incompetent they are, and then be consciously competent at the skill. And after many years of work, finally reach a level of competency. That initial challenge of, I'm so automated in so many other areas of my life, and now I've got to really concentrate and think on how to learn again, is a fun challenge to deal with. And then dealing with the coordination issues and the lack of flexibility and the posture issues and all of that comes from being an adult they're good challenges. They're fun challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I noticed too with the coaching adults, with teaching adults, is that sometimes it takes several attempts to really get the point across. Whereas with children, it seems like they'll do literally what you say, what you tell them. They'll just do exactly that. And they may not do it perfectly, but they're going to try to do exactly what you say. Whereas there's so much with adults. And I found, especially with men versus women, there's a big difference there that I've noticed, that they'll just do it completely wrong. And then and it takes like several times to really get through to whatever you're teaching, if it's a drill or part of the stroke or.
Right. I often say that to the guys I coach is, that all my job is saying the same thing in 1,000 different ways, hoping the light bulb will turn on when I say one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much it. It is just reiterating the same thing many different times and many different perspectives and waiting for one of them to catch on. But that's 100% right. It's interesting that you bring up the difference between men and women. My gut feel on that is an ego thing. I think women are able to humble themselves and learn a little bit easier than men are, and men do not like being abused by the water. Because I think there is the masculine approach is, I'll just fight it. But then you realize that the water cannot be fought. You'll not win that battle. And so, it's an interesting note that you've noticed there too on the men versus the women.
Yeah. And even just looking at like who comes to me for lessons, or in the past who's come to me, it's more women than men actually, which is surprising because I only teach triathletes, and triathlon I think is in the US is like 65% male or maybe more.
Okay.
So it's, but I get more women because I think they're more able to say, like you said, like they're able to be humble about it and be like, right. I don't know everything. Whereas the guys are like, no, I know how to do it. I can do it myself.
Right. Give me a wetsuit. I'll muscle my way through it. Not a problem.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
That's a little tougher to do than it would seem like. So
it is. And I think the trend that piggybacking on who comes to me, I think a large majority of the athletes that I work with that are women come to me before they've raced their first race, whereas the men come to me once they've either plateaued or once they've recognized that they just can't fight the water anymore. So a lot of the female clients that I work with are first timers, and the men have a little bit more of an established track record.
Right. And so you're in Dubai. Is there a big triathlon and swimming scene there?
There is a very big triathlon scene here. Yeah, it's growing. It's grown rapidly just in the 4 or 5 years that I've been involved here. Dubai is, I think, quote me on this, but I think it is the largest triathlon club in the world. It's not an organized, structured club. It's a very laissez-faire group, but with Ironman. With the Ironman Global Club points system, I believe that they have the highest number of representatives. It's over I know that the group, so the Facebook group, which is not always directly representative, but there's good 5,000 members in that group. That there are active sessions that happen on a weekly basis, open water swims, group rides, runs, strength workouts, all actually for free around the city. And with that ease of access, there is the community has just grown and grown. And we have absolutely beautiful facilities here in Dubai. Obviously, the weather is conducive to outdoor sports for most of the year, except when it's very, very hot in the summer. So the beaches are beautiful, nice flat water. We have like 200 plus kilometers or 160 odd miles of dedicated open cycle track. Unique open cycle track, and then there's miles of unique running track along the beaches and that sort of thing. So the facilities lend themselves and the environment lends itself to the triathlon scene. And yeah, there's a local race season which runs October to March through the winter in Dubai. And every year we see more and more people getting involved and more people racing.
All right. And so I see a bike there on your wall. Do you race as well?
I haven't for a number of years. I got back into it about 8 months ago. I raced 70.3 Colombo in February, so about a month ago, and really enjoyed it. And so I'll probably race again in the Philippines in August. So yeah, I'm getting back into racing again.
Nice. And so what actually brought you to Dubai?
That's a great question. So I retired swimming competitively myself in 2012 after Olympic trials. And when I did that, I decided to stop coaching. And so I took a little break and moved into working for a software startup, which then took me to Macedonia in Eastern Europe. And I worked there for a little while, and then recognized that working in an office and sitting on a computer all day was not my idea of fun. And so looked for a place that my wife and I could come and settle down and travel and get good weather and be able to get outdoors. And that Dubai looked like a perfect place to do that.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a journey.
Yeah. I think having lived in as many countries as I have and moved around the world, there was not really, I didn't feel limited anyway. So it was almost a matter of where do we want to go and how do we get in there? What can we do there? Dubai was the perfect place for us at the time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so we were going to focus on 3 challenges to swimming for the non-swimmer triathlete. So that was kind of the theme that we came up with for this show. So I think we just get right into it. There's 3 challenges that we're thinking of, and I'm going to list them. Then we can talk about each one individually. So the first one is confidence. Second one, breathing, and the third one is body awareness.
Right. So yeah, I think if we want to start with at the top of the list, I think there are so many challenges that new swimmers struggle with when they get into the water. As with, I think any list that we make with swimming, I think that was how we actually connected. Was an email that you sent out that was listing 3 things, and all 3 things were spot on, bang on. And I said, that's a great email. And you said, yeah, it was really hard to come down with a list of just 3 things. So always hard to kind of limit it, but. Yeah, I think those 3 challenges are probably the most common that I see with guys and girls that are looking to get into finding out how to swim more efficiently. The first is a mental thing. I think the confidence, just being able to approach the water in a way that after your first try, I think a lot of people will approach it, got the goggles, got the cap, got the swimsuit, head down to the local wire, head down to the pool and jump in, and they swim that first 25 or the first 50 and they're absolutely gassed and beaten. And they go, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Yeah. And then it sort of becomes this mental challenge of how do I go about structuring a way to get myself from where I am now to swimming a 70.3 distance or an Olympic distance or even a super sprint or a sprint distance, because that just seems so inconceivably far from where I am right now. So how do I get there? So yeah, I think kind of finding that confidence of immersing yourself in something that's so different is a challenge for a lot of swimmers or new swimmers.
Yeah. Do you have specific ideas on how they can improve that confidence? Like, what do you think of first when you think about someone that needs more confidence for a swim?
So this is a little bit off the wall, but I have been known to make off the wall suggestions. But one of the things that I'll have my new swimmers do is simply just play in the water. I think that when people try and learn to swim, when adults particularly learn to swim and they go in with a mission to master moving through the water, they become very task orientated. And I think in many areas of our lives, being task orientated tends to be a productive thing. But when you get in an environment that's so foreign to your normal environment, like the water, this association with this is the goal I have to achieve, the pressure that comes with that, and the association that you start to build with the water, it becomes almost a negative pressure built one. And that doesn't do anything for anyone's confidence. So I get my guys to play, just to simply kind of mess around in the water before a session or after a session, or I'll encourage them to go with their kids and just mess around in the shallow end of the pool, going under, diving, going down the slides, doing whatever, that we start to build a positive association with the water instead of having it be something that we fear. And then as that sort of positive association starts to come through, keeping the sessions that you do fun by, playing games that the same way that you would do with kids almost, where your drills become kind of challenges and games, and we kind of gamify it almost. That starts to build a more positive association with the water. And then as we kind of move on from that, it's just having the appropriate prescription for intensity, the appropriate prescription for volume, not ever taking 3 steps further forward than where we are right now, but kind of incrementally increasing it so that we never feel completely out of our depth. And I think that's something that a good coach will always do, is they'll always push you just slightly further than you're comfortable being, but never going to push you too far. And I think if you can associate positively with the water and then just be incrementally challenged as you build up, the confidence grows organically, and you start to believe more and more that you can do whatever you can do. But it's not always a straight line. It's not always a clear path. And I know that I still have clients that will message me the night before and say, I'm really excited about tomorrow's workout. And then they'll get to the pool and they'll say, I've just been sitting in my car for 40 minutes because I didn't want to come in here because I was afraid of what we're going to do today. So that juxtaposition of really wanting it, but still having the fear of what's going to come at me and what's in the water, it's still there. Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I love that approach because I used to have the tagline for Tri-Swim Coach, laugh at the water. Right. And I recently changed it about a year ago to befriend the water. And because I think that's the starting point, is to work with the water. And at first I was like thinking laugh because it's like we want to have fun. But then I thought about that tagline as like, you don't really want to laugh at the water because it's sort of like making a joke of it, but actually have fun and enjoy the water, and then things become easier. And that goes to also the idea of, kind of not looking at the workout. It's like all throughout our day, we're doing things that are like tasks, and we have checklists and like to-do lists and all this stuff. And so with swimming and triathlon, we want to be more playful, I think, and actually look at it as an enjoyable thing. So I really like that approach that you're taking. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it was Alexander Popov, one of the great Russian Olympic sprinters, who said the water is your friend. You don't have to fight the water; just share the same spirit as the water. So it's that sort of thing. But when it is such a direct threat to your survival, and I think that this plays a big role in the learning process. The analogy that I'll often use with some of my clients when they're struggling with something and still have that kind of fear, that lack that confidence, is if you think about the learning institutions that you've been through or gone to, when you think about the way a library is designed, it's quiet, it's safe, it's a secure place, and that's conducive to learning, right? When your mind is able to kind of shut off all the outside stuff, it's able to focus on learning a skill or memorizing or doing whatever you need to learn. But if we insert a danger into the environment, your ability to learn very much diminishes. If we had to threaten your life in some way and ask you to memorize something or to learn a skill very quickly, your ability to do it is highly compromised. And if you go into the water with this sort of survival threat, the water is a threat and I need to survive it type mentality, your mindset is not in a place where you're going to be able to, it's not going to be conducive to learning really well. And so that building that confidence and, like you say, befriending the water, looking at it more as something that's going to help you rather than something that's a threat to you is going to increase or propel you forward a whole lot faster than if you look at it as something that's a threat to you. So I like that, befriending them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're totally on the same page there. So the second challenge that we wanted to cover is something that I think just about everybody that I've ever taught swimming to gets tripped up on at some point. And it's something that we cover a lot with Tri-Swim Coach in our course. And then we have actually a bonus course that goes really in depth into it, and that's breathing. So let's start with breathing. What's your experience, and what do you think about breathing?
Yeah, I love that you started that with everybody, just about everybody gets tripped up on this. And that became apparent to me not right at the beginning when I started coaching. When I started coaching adults, I kind of had this understanding or this assumption that if somebody could swim a certain set or swim at a certain pace, that they must have breathing figured out. And then we would get to some point and they'd all of a sudden hit a plateau, and nothing that we did technique wise or nothing that we did training stimulus wise seemed to change the pace that they were able to swim at. And these are like relatively, in triathlon terms, relatively accomplished swimmers that were kind of stuck. And we went back and kind of back to ground zero again and figured out there was a breathing issue. So I love that you opened that up with just about everybody struggles with this at some point. And just because you can swim a 35 or a 40 minutes 70.3, or you can get out of the water in a full distance Ironman in like an hour and 15 minutes, doesn't necessarily mean that you have your breathing completely figured out, which is, so I like that. As far as breathing is concerned, this is kind of the biggest challenge, definitely for somebody that doesn't have a swimming background, just learning how to manage that air exchange. And I think oftentimes the fear that we've just talked about and the kind of lack of confidence leads into this. It goes hand in hand, because obviously when you are nervous, your heart rate is elevated, your breathing gets shallow, and that kind of plays a big role the moment if that's our baseline, if that's where we're starting from, and then we add in exercise induced heavy breathing or getting the heart pumping, it makes it even worse. So the kind of, again, it's a very much an incremental process that I like to work through with the guys that I work with, just getting them comfortable with the air exchange at various different levels. So breathing in short and exhaling nice and long, and then breathing in long, exhaling nice and long, just kind of playing with the ratios of in to out, again, playing a central theme, and then kind of working through drills, which I find help a lot with teaching people, just various different drills that help a lot with teaching people just the basics of kind of learning how to get that air in, get that air out. Once we have sort of a very basic understanding of how to breathe in through our mouth and kind of exhale through the mouth and the nose, then I like to split it up, breathing up into two distinct parts. One is the air exchange. So what is the ratio of how long do we breathe in for? How much do we hold our breath? Do we hold our breath? How long do we exhale for? And what's the sort of timing in that? And then the second part of it is the mechanics. So how do I get my head, or how do I get my body into the right position in order to be able to take a good enough breath that I need to? And we kind of play through those different aspects. I think one of the biggest things, and I'm not actually familiar with your recommendations on Try Swim Coach with this, but one of the most interesting conversations that I tend to have around breathing with triathletes is the debate on breathing every 2 versus breathing every 3. What is the Try Swim Coach approach or direction on that?
Yeah, that's always a good controversial topic to go with. And it's something that I teach, the bilateral breathing method, but because breathing is such a challenge, and the beginning part of swimming, it's really important to get oxygen in your body. And if you're swimming, especially a long distance, and you're just not getting the oxygen, you're trying to do bilateral breathing, then you're actually hurting yourself, and your progress is going to be slower than if you just do what you're comfortable with at first. Like maybe it's every 2 strokes. Maybe that's your comfort level. And everything, you can work on all the other parts of your stroke and still breathe every 2 strokes. Then I always say, just do that for now. And then once you get everything else kind of dialed in, then we can start working on breathing every 3 strokes. Because in an open water swim, it is nice to be able to get air on either side. So I say it is important, but it's not something I would teach like right at the beginning, like you have to know this or you're going to drown or something.
Right. And that's, we have very similar approaches there. So I tend, if somebody comes to me completely fresh or completely green without any sort of background in swimming at all, we tend to go with breathing every 2, just because there is a much greater amount of oxygen that they can get, which keeps the heart rate lower and keeps them a lot more controlled. So the way I look at it is sort of oxygen is king. And being able to get you through the distance at first comfortably is our most important priority. And then we add a layer of skill on top of that, which is the ability to breathe to both sides. So yeah, I think we have a very similar approach there of going with what's comfortable at first, recognizing that getting air in or oxygen is king. And then I tend not to teach bilateral breathing to a majority of my clients. There are some with certain flexibility limitations and certain body types. I find that bilateral breathing tends to work much better. But when I do teach people to breathe both sides, we tend to stick to breathing every 2, but we'll alternate sides. We may go every 2, every 3, every 2, or go 2 for a period and then on the other side 2 for a period. But this starts to get a little bit more swimmer specific. But I think that this is a point that gets a lot of triathletes that don't work with swim coaches when they first start out, is that they'll watch YouTube videos or listen to podcasts like this, where the idea of breathing every 3 is reinforced. And I find that a lot of them will come to me not be able to get through particular big distances because they're breathing every 3, and they'll make a switch to going to breathing every 2. And all of a sudden, the amount of swimming that they're able to do and the effort level, the perceived effort level that it takes to get them through that distance, all of a sudden becomes a whole lot more manageable, and the confidence grows. And from there, we kind of build. So yeah, I like that we're on the same page there. One of my favorite tools to use in the pool is actually the snorkel, the center mounted snorkel. So I tend to do a lot of work with the snorkel with my clients early on. I find that if they can learn how to master breathing through the snorkel, they tend to have much better grip on how to breathe in the water, because unlike a snorkeling mask, snorkel, where the mask goes over the nose, when you wear a center mounted swimming snorkel, you have to be able to control air in and out of your nose. And I find that if they're able to learn how to master the snorkel, it tends to carry over very nicely in learning how to control the breath when they go into regular swimming. So we'll do a lot of the drills with the snorkel on early on. And I also find that helps master the drills a lot more effectively, because you're removing the element of having to breathe and having to turn the head and break the body line or break the body position or break the concentration because you're running out of air. So the center mounted snorkel is one of my favorite tools to use with my clients, and I find that really does help kind of build that breathing foundation. And then, yeah, just a sort of the next step, once we're comfortable from that point with breathing, is this is something that I work with some of my clients from time to time, would be to remove the watch or the clock completely from the training environment and learn how intensities feel based on your breathing. So I think that oftentimes, specifically with triathletes, we become very pace orientated and everything's checking the watch and how fast was that 50 and how fast was that 100 and what was my pace. And that becomes the entire focus. When we remove that from the equation, just like I've heard it, I don't know for certain, but I've heard people explain that if you lose your sight, your other senses become much more heightened and you become much more aware. So if we take the watch or the clock out of the equation during a workout, during a hard workout, and ask you to gauge intensity based on your breathing, you become a whole lot more aware of what you're doing with your breath and how you're breathing at different points. And that tends to help you gauge your pace a lot more effectively than looking down at your watch. So a little bit more advanced on the advanced side of the breathing. But I found it very helpful when swimmers learn to gauge intensity based on how they are breathing.
Yeah, I like that method for sure. And I do love the snorkel as well. I actually had somebody not too long ago ask me about, can you use a snorkel in a race? And that was an interesting question.
Do you know the answer to that? Because I have a feeling that you may use a snorkel in some races, but there is something that happens with, like, there are qualification criteria, or there's something that happens, but I'm not sure. I have a feeling that it's not just outright like you can't use it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I think it was. I think it was something like that. I forgot the answer now, because it's
right.
Like something that I get asked every day. But
yeah, and I think you're right. I think the answer is, it's not like a pair of fins where it's like the answer is simply no, you cannot wear that. There is some situations when you can actually wear one, but then there are caveats to the rule. Yeah,
there's a lot of, with the rules with triathlon, there's a lot of gray areas where people aren't really sure what's accepted and what's not. And
right.
So that's one of them.
The only question I would have in reply to that is, sighting might provide a bit of a difficult challenge if you're wearing a center-mounted snorkel.
That's true. Yeah, that could be really tough. Can't imagine that. So number 3 we had for these challenges to swimming for the non-swimmer triathlete is body awareness.
Again, goes back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning with the confidence, which is why that was the place to start. As an adult, you've spent a lot of time learning how the laws of gravity work and learning how to interact with the environment that you do interact with on land on a daily basis. You think about the amount of hours that you've spent as a 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old interacting with the environment around you, the number of hours, the number of seconds, it's an enormous amount of time. And then we put you into the water, which is a completely different environment. So gravity disappears completely. We go from being horizontal to being vertical. And then we take the breathing, we limit the oxygen consumption that you can have, and ask you to try and master that in like 45 minutes 3 times a week or an hour 3 times a week. It becomes an incredibly difficult thing to do. And the body awareness piece plays a big role in that, because we're so used to operating vertically, because we're so used to operating within the laws of gravity. When we remove those, put you horizontally and take the gravity out, oftentimes we have zero idea of what we're actually doing in the water. And this is one of the reasons why video analysis is such an incredibly powerful tool, because more often than not, people will see themselves swim for the first time and go, is that really me? It doesn't feel like that. Is that what it looks like? Because it certainly doesn't feel like that. I mean, that's just a complete lack of body awareness. And then it comes down to the muscles that we use as we lay horizontally in the water and as we shift side to side, relying on our arms to propel us forward. We don't do any of those things on land. We use completely different muscle groups in different ways on land. So putting us in a horizontal environment and getting us to move, having the body awareness is a challenge. So I know that you use a number of drill progressions in your program to help people understand this. And this is the value of drills, is teaching that body awareness. So often adult swimmers will come and approach swimming having looked at the whole stroke, having seen somebody do it on YouTube, or having seen somebody swim. And the human brain is an amazing thing where it can kind of take the model, put it together in its whole piece, and then replicate it to some degree, usually very, very inefficiently. And that's why we struggle to swim fast. And that's why we struggle to swim easy over long distances. And that's why we struggle with swimming for triathlon. What a drill does is it breaks those down into smaller pieces that help us to learn the awareness of specific body parts and their roles in the stroke in isolation. And as we sort of build each piece in isolation and then put them back together, the body awareness, or how our body works and is connected through the stroke, grows. And that's when we start to kind of get an idea of how to more efficiently move through the water. And so, yeah, I think that this body awareness issue is very much approached from the drill's perspective. There is an argument or a debate within a number of the triathlon coaching factions on the value of doing drills as triathletes. But I think specifically as you're starting out, building that body awareness through drills, you simply have to do them to be able to gain awareness of what your body's doing and how it's going to effectively move through the water.
Yeah, and you mentioned videotaping. So seeing yourself on video, do you think that's something that, like we're talking about these non-swimmer background triathletes, is that something that they should do right away? Like let's say they find a coach like you or I, and they're like, I'm wondering where I am now. Should they be looking at their stroke right away, or should they start with some drills and get up to speed and then get a video of their stroke and then start to analyze it?
So that's a great question. And the way that I approach that with my clients is I look for a level of competency in moving forward through the water before I will do a video analysis with anyone. So if we're a complete beginner and we can't swim, we can swim 25 yards, 25 meters, maybe 50 meters at a stretch, but that's kind of it for the day. Then no, I don't think that video analysis, I think that we need to then approach the confidence issue and the breathing issue before we get to some sort of body awareness. And that may only take 2 or 3 sessions or 2 or 3 hours worth of work to get us to a point where we can make forward propulsion. So I think with my clients, we'll start the video analysis process very early on, but it isn't necessarily the first thing that we will do. And the reason that we start it very early on is just simply because I can explain something to you, but until you see it and actually connect with the video, that what I'm saying often doesn't go through. So yeah, we'll start it early, but not always the first thing that we'll do.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's usually what I say as well. I think there's some value in getting a video early on, so you have a before and after kind of thing, where later on when you are able to see your stroke before, and then maybe 6 weeks later after you've been doing drills and practicing and getting coaching, then you actually see it versus like you may not feel like you're doing anything that's that much better or different. But then when you see it, you're like, wow, there is a huge difference. Right,
100%. And actually, I read a great article on Training Peaks today written by Dan Bullock from Swim for Tri, who's based in the UK. He had a really cool breakdown of the learning process, or what he sees as part of the learning process for adult triathletes. And one of the stages, I think it may have been stage 1, is you feel like you're swimming with less effort, but you're not actually swimming faster. And that because triathletes tend to be so focused on pace, that kind of plays a role in the confidence thing. And then if you can use video to reinforce that, look, you're swimming with less effort and it looks like this versus what it did look like, we can build speed off of this. That kind of helps grow the confidence. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Do you know if that was on Training Peaks?
Yeah, it was on Training Peaks blog. I could try and find the link for it so you could post it.
Yeah, if we have the link, we'll put it in the show notes. But it does. Right.
Yeah, it was a cool article that identified with it, because he talks about the stages of learning, going from that conscious, unconscious incompetence to all the way through the stages of learning, and kind of how that correlates to learning to swim. It's a very cool article.
Cool. Well, there you have it. There's our 3 challenges to swimming for the non-swimmer triathlete. That was a great discussion, Rory. I think a lot of value was dropped here today. And I really enjoy having you on the show. And I think I like the way you put things. I like the way you describe things. I think it's going to be really helpful for people to listen to this show.
My pleasure, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I hope it's given some value to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where should they go?
So my website is icanswimfast.com. So if they headed over to icanswimfast.com, I have a fundamentals guide to swimming for triathlon that is up on that site for free. And you can kind of breaks down triathlon swimming from start to finish. And then they could find me on Instagram at ICSwimFast. Although, self-complete confession, I've been way too busy to be active on there for the last couple of weeks, but it is on the to-do list again. So those two places are where I hang out the most when I'm not on the pool deck.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and wish you all the best, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Tri Swim Coach podcast. If you like this show, consider giving us a 5-star review on iTunes, and we'll read it off on the next show. And to get the latest triathlon swimming tips, tricks, blogs, and podcasts, go to triswimcoach.com. See you next time. Until then, befriend the water.